Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind carried dust and judgment with equal weight as Katherine Rhoades stood on the courthouse steps, her hands cuffed in front of her, her eyes too steady for a guilty woman. The crowd around her buzzed with gossip and spit. "She's lying," someone muttered. "Stole from the mercantile, ran off with the money, then blamed the fire on the owner's son." "I did not," Katherine said, her voice low but clear. "I never stole anything, and I sure as hell didn't set that fire." No one listened. Not the sheriff, not the deputy, and not the people who used to wave at her every morning. They called her a liar, a thief, a woman with no shame, and every time she said she was innocent, the words fell heavy and unwanted in the dirt. She was 23, alone, and carrying the weight of a town's hatred. All because Clarence Dunley, the mercantile owner's son, had cornered her in the back room 2 weeks ago, and she had shoved him away. The next day, the mercantile burned down, and Clarence claimed she did it out of spite, said she had stolen $30 and vanished that night. Except she had not vanished. She had gone home 2 miles out of town to a small clapboard house with a broken porch swing and a little girl inside with wide eyes and a fever. Katherine had not run. She had taken care of her daughter, Violet, and waited for things to settle. They never did. The sheriff arrested her 5 days later, and now they were marching her to jail. "Where's that cowboy you used to write to?" a woman jeered from the crowd. "You always said he'd come back for you. Maybe he can ride you right out of this mess." Katherine flinched. She had not spoken of Quinn Ellery in years, not since he left their town at 19 and never wrote again. But she remembered his letters before that. Letters full of dreams and dust and promises that never turned into anything real. She tilted her chin up, jaw set. "I never said he was coming back." But somewhere in the hills, far beyond the town's edge, a horse's hooves struck hard against the earth, and Quinn Ellery was finally riding home. The sun was low when Quinn stopped on the ridge overlooking Redstone. The town looked smaller than he remembered, but the wind still carried the same scent of pine smoke and worn leather. He had not planned to come back. Not after building a life punching cattle near Rawlins. Not after burying his brother last winter and nearly freezing through the grief. But the letter had come anyway. Not from Katherine. From an old neighbor, passed along by a ranch hand who happened to be riding through. It was short, just a few lines. "Katherine is in trouble. They're saying she set the fire. You know she would never. And she has a little girl now. I thought you should know." Quinn folded the letter again and tucked it into his vest as his horse, Dusty, picked a careful path down the slope. He had not seen Katherine in 6 years, but he had not forgotten her. He remembered her freckles, the way she laughed when she ran through the orchard behind her house, the way she read books with her legs folded under her like a cat. He remembered the last day he saw her, standing by the edge of the creek, telling him he should go chase whatever it was pulling him west, but he better write. He did, for 2 years. Then life got heavy and he stopped. And she never wrote back. Now she was in jail. Katherine sat on the cot in the corner of the cell, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair pinned back tight. She refused to cry. The sheriff's office door swung open, and heavy boots stepped inside. Sheriff Marlowe looked up from his desk, surprised. "Can I help you?" "I heard a woman was arrested for setting fire to the mercantile," Quinn said. "That's right. I want to see her." Marlowe narrowed his eyes. "You related?" "No, you law." "No." "Then you ain't got any reason to be poking around." Quinn stepped forward, his voice even. "She is not guilty. I want to see her." The sheriff stared at him for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the back. "Second cell." Katherine looked up when he appeared, her entire body going still. "Quinn," she whispered. He gripped the bars. "Katie." She stood slowly. "What are you doing here?" Came to see about a fire, he said. And a lie. She stared at him for a long moment, then looked away. Everyone believes Clarence. Even the judge. They moved the trial up. I have 4 days. I am not everyone. She blinked hard. I did not do it. I know. Something in her face cracked. Just a little. Her shoulders sagged, and she sat back down. You left, she said quietly. I know. You stopped writing. I know that too. She looked at him, eyes sharp. I have a daughter. I know, he said again. Violet. Her lips parted, then pressed shut. I want to help you, he said. Why now? He leaned forward, voice low. Because I should have never left you alone in the first place. By nightfall, Quinn had ridden out to the edge of town, to the little clapboard house with the broken porch swing. He knocked once. A girl, no older than 5, opened the door. She had Catherine's eyes. Who are you? She asked. Name's Quinn, he said. You must be Violet. She nodded solemnly. Is anyone here with you? She shook her head. Mama said not to open the door for strangers. But I heard your voice. You sound like the man in her letters. Quinn swallowed hard. I came to help her. Violet stepped back. Then come in. The house was clean but worn. There was soup on the stove, a quilt on the floor, and a small wooden horse by the hearth. He crouched beside her. Do you remember anything from the night the mercantile burned? She looked thoughtful. Mama was reading to me. Then she went to the barn when the dog barked. Did she leave the house? No. The dog was barking at someone in the trees. Quinn looked up sharply. What time was that? Late. After the moon was big. He stood. Thank you. He tucked her back into bed, left a note by the door for the neighbor to check on her at dawn, and rode back into town. The girl had just given him what no one else could reasonably doubt. And that was where he would start. By morning, the town was buzzing again, but this time, it was because Quinn Ellery was back. The boy who used to steal apples and fix fences. The boy who had loved Katherine Rhoades like she hung the moon. Now he was a man, and he was not just here to see her. He was here to save her. And maybe, if he had not ruined everything already, win her back. The morning air was still edged with frost when Quinn stepped into the livery stable, the scent of hay and damp wood filling his lungs. He found the stable hand, a boy no older than 16, brushing down a spotted mare. Quinn waited until the boy raised his head. You work nights? Quinn asked. The boy nodded, wary. Sometimes. Depends. You hear the night the mercantile burned? He hesitated, then gave a cautious shrug. I was. Quinn stepped closer, his voice steady. You see anything? Or anyone? The boy glanced toward the open doors, then back. I saw Clarence Dunley come tearing through here just before the fire bells rang. He was out of breath. Saddle wasn't set right. Looked like he'd ridden hard from somewhere, not to somewhere. You tell the sheriff? A shake of the head. Ain't no one wants to cross the Dunleys. Clarence's uncle's on the land board. Quinn's jaw tightened. You'd rather see a woman hang than speak? The boy's voice dropped. I didn't say that. Then say what you saw. To me. Plain. The boy swallowed. He had soot on his hands. And he smelled like lamp oil. Quinn nodded once. That's enough. He left the stable without looking back, boots crunching over broken straw. The boy's words sat heavy in his chest, not because they surprised him, but because they didn't. Clarence Dunley had always thought himself untouchable. Outside, the sun had warmed the dirt enough to soften the frost. Quinn crossed the street toward the dressmaker's shop. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside, and a woman with steel-colored hair looked up from her stitching. Ma'am, he said. You hemmed a white linen shirt for Clarence Dunley last week? I did. You remember if it came back to you after the fire? She studied him a moment. No. Why? Did it smell of smoke? She hesitated, then nodded. It stank of it. Burned through at the cuff. I asked about it, but he said he'd had a lantern tip over in the barn. Didn't seem like a lie I needed to chase. It might be now. He left before she could ask more, boots carrying him through town with purpose. What he needed next was the ledger from the mercantile if Clarence claimed Katherine had stolen money. There ought to be a record of what went missing. What Quinn found instead was the remains of the building itself. Charred beams, fallen brick, and a scorched safe pried open like a split chestnut. The scent of old smoke still clung to the air. A man stood nearby, sorting through broken shelving with a stick. You with the bank? The man asked. No, Quinn said. I'm with the truth. The man laughed dryly. Then you're in short company. Quinn stepped closer. Was there anything left inside? A few ledgers, most burned, but the one from the week before the fires in the clerk's office. Why? I need it. The man frowned. You Katherine Rhoades' brother? No. Then why re you asking questions like this matters to you? Quinn's voice dropped. Because someone's got to. He rode to the clerk's office next. The ledger was there singed along the spine, but legible. He flipped through the pages until he found the week Clarence claimed Katherine took the money. There was no $30 shortage. But there was a cash withdrawal made by Clarence himself 2 days before the fire. For $30. He closed the book slowly. By the time the sun began its slide behind the hills, Quinn was back at the jail. Marlowe looked up as he entered, his eyes tired. You come to stir things again? I came to show you this. Quinn laid the ledger on the sheriff's desk. And tell you about a shirt, a stable hand, and a girl who remembers hearing something in the trees. Marlowe didn't speak for a while. Then he drew in a slow breath. You think you're the first to bring me doubt? I'm not bringing doubt, Quinn said. I'm bringing proof. The sheriff opened the ledger, scanned the page, and grunted. You get the boy to talk under oath? He'll talk in front of anyone if you ask him. Marlowe leaned back in his chair. You think this'll be enough to overturn what they all want to believe? I think it's enough to make them question it. The sheriff rubbed a hand over his face. Trials in 3 days. I'll call the boy, the dressmaker, and the clerk. That's all I can promise. Quinn nodded once. He moved to the back, where Katherine sat with her head resting against the wall. She looked up when he came, her expression unreadable. Anything change? She asked. He pulled the ledger from under his arm and held it where she could see. Turns out, someone else took that money. Her eyes moved over the page, brow furrowing. How'd you get this? Asked. He lowered his voice. Sheriff's calling witnesses. Real ones. She looked at him a long moment. Why are you really doing this? Because I never stopped wanting to be the one who stood between you and the world. Her mouth parted, but she didn't speak. Her fingers curled around the bars. He reached up, covered her hand with his. You don't have to believe that yet, but I'll prove it, same as I'm proving the rest. She didn't pull away. Outside, the sky darkened to violet, and for the first time in weeks, Katherine let herself breathe. Because someone finally believed her, not with pity, but with fire. By the second morning, frost no longer clung to the eaves, but the town's mood hadn't thawed. The trial was set to begin at noon, and the streets had the hush of something bracing to snap. Folks moved quieter than usual, glancing toward the courthouse with sidelong eyes, like just looking too long might pull them into something they didn't want to admit they'd ignored. Quinn stood just outside the sheriff's office, arms crossed, jaw set. He'd shaved before dawn with a borrowed razor and cold water from the pump, and wore the only clean shirt he had, the collar stiff from quick drying. His features were steady, but a muscle in his jaw jumped every time someone passed and muttered Catherine's name like it was a curse. Marlowe came out, coat slung over one shoulder, papers tucked under his arm. "You ready?" he asked. Quinn nodded once. "You find the boy?" "He's waiting by the bakery. Nervous, but he'll come." "Good. She still doesn't know?" Quinn shook his head. "I figured she's had enough empty promises. I want her to hear it when it counts." Inside the jail, Katherine sat on the edge of the cot, hands clasped between her knees. She'd braided her hair back tight, and a neighbor had brought her a clean dress, plain gray calico with a mended hem, but her eyes were what held the room. Not angry, not afraid, just wide open, like someone bracing for a blow and determined not to flinch. When Quinn stepped in, she stood. "They're taking me now?" He nodded. "I'll be there." She didn't move. "I keep thinking I'll wake up, and this'll all be just something I imagined. All of it, the fire, the lies, you showing up out of nowhere. You didn't imagine me." "No," she said quietly. "I didn't." They walked out together, the sheriff leading. The crowd outside parted, but no one called out this time. There was a shift in the air, not forgiveness. Not yet, but something quieter. A pause, as if the town had started to wonder if maybe it had missed something. Inside the courthouse, the room filled fast. Someone shut the door behind them, and the scrape of benches echoed sharp. Katherine sat beside the defense lawyer, a wiry man from Laramie who'd arrived the night before and had already asked her more questions than anyone else had since her arrest. He didn't smile, didn't offer comfort, just nodded once and told her to speak plain when it came time. Clarence Dunley sat near the front, coat too fine for the room, arms folded tight. He didn't look at her, just stared at the judge like he already knew the ending. The judge, a man with white whiskers and a voice like gravel, called things to order. Quinn watched from the back as the prosecution laid out its claims. The money gone, the fire, Clarence's word. They spoke of motive like it was fact. Spite, jealousy, rejection. The town leaned in. Some nodded. Some didn't. Then they called Clarence. He walked up like he owned the floor. Spoke calm, like rehearsed. "She was angry," he said. "She came back to the shop after dark. Said she wanted to talk. I told her she had no place there anymore. She left. That night, the place burned." The lawyer for the defense didn't look up from his notes. "You're sure it was her?" "She was the only one with cause." "Did anyone see her?" "No, did you?" Clarence hesitated. "I heard the back door." "So you didn't see her?" "No." But no one else had reason. The lawyer nodded. "That'll be all for now." Next came the stable hand. He walked up stiff, eyes flicking toward Clarence, then back to the judge. Quinn held his breath. "What's your name, son?" the lawyer asked. "Eli Palmer." "Eli, were you working the night of the fire?" "Yes, sir." "Did you see anyone out of place? Anything strange?" "Yes, sir." Clarence Dunley rode in like someone chasing the devil. His saddle was half-cocked. He smelled like lamp oil, had ash on his cuffs. A rustle swept the room. Clarence shifted in his seat. "You told no one?" "No, sir." "Why now?" The boy straightened. "Because the lady didn't do it." The judge called for order. The dressmaker was called next. She spoke quiet but firm. About the shirt. About the burn. About the lie Clarence had told her. Then the clerk came forward with the ledger. Confirmed the withdrawal. By the time he stepped down, the room had changed. The silence now wasn't scorn, it was unease. Clarence's lawyer stood, tried to discredit the boy, the seamstress, called the ledger a coincidence. But the more he spoke, the less weight his words seemed to carry. The story he'd built didn't hold. At last, the judge called Katherine forward. She rose, walked to the front, spine straight. The room didn't blink as she took her oath. Tell us where you were the night of the fire. I was home, reading to my daughter. The dog barked. I stepped out to check the barn. That was it. Did you go to the mercantile? No. Did you steal anything? No. Did you set the fire? No, the lawyer nodded. That's all. No one else stood. The judge leaned back, eyes sweeping the room. Then he spoke, voice low but firm. I've heard enough. He took a breath. Katherine Rhoades, you are free to go. The charges are dropped. The room exploded. Not with cheers, but with noise shifts, whispers, the scrape of boots. Clarence stood, mouth open as if to protest, but the sheriff was already by his side. Come with me, Marlowe said. We've got new questions to ask. Katherine stood frozen, eyes locked on the judge, chest rising and falling like she couldn't quite believe the air was hers again. Quinn stepped forward. She turned to him. You did this. No, he said. You told the truth. I just helped them hear it. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She reached out, took his hand. He held it. They walked out together as the courthouse emptied behind them. The wind softer now, the sun finally warm. The morning after the trial, Katherine stood in the doorway of her home, arms folded, the wind lifting the edge of her sleeve. The house looked smaller than she remembered it before the arrest, though nothing had changed. The same cracked porch plank, the same trail worn through the grass where Violet dragged her feet on the way to the creek. But she had changed. And the silence around her no longer felt like something pressing in, but something waiting. Violet sat on the floor just inside, legs crossed, peeling the bark from a pine twig. Is Mr. Quinn staying? I don't know yet, Katherine said. He could fix the porch. Katherine looked over her shoulder. We don't need him to fix anything. Violet shrugged. He fixed you. Katherine didn't answer. Out past the gate, Quinn walked the line behind the house, eyes on the fence. He'd slept in the barn the night before, not because she'd told him to, but because she hadn't said anything at all. And he hadn't asked. Now, as he picked his way back toward the house, he carried a coil of wire and a tin of nails. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, and his knuckles were stained with rust. You planning to rebuild the whole place? Katherine asked as he reached the stoop. Only the part that's falling down. You don't owe me anything. I know. She stepped aside to let him pass. He didn't go in, just set the coil down by the steps and sat on the edge of the porch. She joined him after a moment. I never thought I'd see this place again, he said. You left it easy enough. He nodded. I was a boy. I thought running meant I'd find something better. And did you? I found a lot of things. He looked down at his hands. Some of them nearly broke me. Her fingers rested on her knees. You never wrote after that second year. I didn't know how to say what I needed to. Every time I tried, it felt like I was dragging mud across something clean. She was quiet for a long moment. I kept your last letter. The one about the cottonwoods by the creek. I remember writing it. I read it the night Violet was born. He turned to her. I didn't know you were alone. You weren't here. The words sat between them, unvarnished. He looked toward the hills. I've got work waiting back near Rollins come spring. A friend's place. Good land. Steady cattle. He said I could bring someone. Or two someones. Katherine looked down at her hands. You're asking me to leave? I'm asking if you want something that doesn't end with people throwing stones at your name. She met his eyes. You think I can outrun what they said? No, he said. But I think you could walk past it. Her breath caught. Not in surprise, but in something quieter. Something that had waited too long to be spoken aloud. I don't know if I can trust you not to leave again. I don't expect that yet. But you want to stay. He nodded. If you'll let me. Violet's voice called from inside. Mama. There's a bird in the stovepipe again. Katherine stood, brushing her skirt. You'll need a ladder. I saw one behind the shed, he said. She disappeared inside without another word. Quinn followed, slower. He passed through the door into the small kitchen, where sunlight fell in through the window and caught the dust in the air. Violet stood on a chair, pointing at the stove. It's stuck, she said. I tried talking to it. You got a kind voice, Quinn said, reaching for the flue handle. But sometimes folks need more than words to find their way out. He opened the pipe just enough to let the bird flutter free. It darted across the room, clipped the top of the curtain rod, and shot out the open door. Violet clapped. You fixed it. Katherine leaned against the jamb, watching him. He turned to her. One thing at a time. She nodded slowly. Then, after a pause, she reached for the tin of biscuits on the shelf and set it on the table. Stay for supper. Saturday. I was hoping you'd ask. Outside, the wind moved through the grass without hurry. And inside that quiet room, something fragile settled into place. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the shape of it. The start. The snow came early that year, gentle at first, thin flakes spinning through the air like ash from an old fire. By the time Katherine stepped outside with a basin of water for the hens, it had begun to settle across the fence rails and the roof shingles, softening the hard edges of the yard. Quinn was in the lean-to, splitting kindling with slow, even strokes. He didn't pause when she came near, just shifted slightly to make room beside the chopping stump. They keep pecking at the latch, she said, setting the basin down. Violet taught them how to find the feed bin. She'll outsmart us all before spring, he said, sliding another log into place. She already has. He smiled without looking up, focused on his task. The pile of cut wood beside him was growing taller than the fence post. She watched the way his shoulders moved steady, without waste. There was something grounding in how he worked, how he listened without the need to fill silence. She folded her arms against the cold. I heard back from the land office. The deed's clear. He looked up. That's good. They asked if I planned to keep the property. He set down the axe. Do you want to? I do. But it needs more than I can give it alone. You're not alone. I know. That's the part one keep reminding myself. He stepped closer, brushing sawdust from his sleeves. I meant what I said about Rollins. But I don't need to chase cattle across the state to feel useful. What would you do here? Build a new barn. Start a few head. Maybe a mule or two. Trade with the folks who still look you in the eye. They're fewer than they used to be. They'll come around. Or they won't. Either way, I'm not leaving. Her eyes met his, steady and unsentimental. I want something that lasts, Quinn. Not just until your boots get restless again. My boots never got restless, he said. Just my heart. And I found where it belongs. She didn't answer, but her hand found his. Inside the house, Violet called out for her doll's missing shoe, and Katherine turned toward the door. Come in before your fingers freeze. He followed, brushing snow from his coat. That night, they ate by lamplight, the small table crowded with stew bowls and a plate of cornmeal biscuits. Violet told a story about the rooster chasing the cat into the woodpile, punctuating each moment with wild gestures and a mouth full of crumbs. Quinn listened like it was the most important tale ever told. When she finished, he raised his bowl and said, To the bravest girl in Wyoming. Katherine raised hers too. And to the man who got a bird out of the stovepipe without knocking down the chimney. Violet beamed between them, kicking her feet under the table. Later, after the dishes were done and Violet had fallen asleep with one arm around her patched-up doll, Katherine stood by the window watching the snow thicken into a soft hush across the yard. Behind her, Quinn leaned against the doorway. I can fix that shutter in the morning. She didn't turn. You could fix it tonight. It's after dark. You still have your coat on. He stepped up beside her, the warmth of him close without pressing. Outside, the moon cast the bare trees in silver, and the porch rail wore a perfect white line. I never wanted a life that stayed still, she said quietly, but I want one that holds. He reached for her hand, careful. Then let's build it. Here. Together. She turned to him fully, her gaze open, unguarded. You sure you're ready to stay? I've been ready since the day I walked back into that jail and saw you standing like the world hadn't broken you. It tried. And you're still standing. His kiss was gentle, warm in the hush between them. When she leaned into it, it wasn't with hesitation but with trust earned one slow step at a time. That winter, they mended the porch and dug a root cellar. In the spring, they built a barn with wide doors and a hayloft Violet turned into her fort. The hens multiplied, the garden grew thick with beans and onions, and Quinn brought home 2 dun horses from a neighbor's auction. They slept each night side by side under a patched quilt, their hands meeting in the dark without needing to speak. By the second year, the townspeople stopped whispering. Some came to trade eggs. A few brought fence wire or seed potatoes. None asked about the trial, and no one mentioned Clarence Dunley again. He'd left town before the snow melted that first spring, and nobody missed him. One Sunday, Katherine stood by the creek in a blue calico dress, while Violet scattered wildflowers at her feet. Quinn took her hand, the preacher mumbled his words, and when they kissed beneath the cottonwoods, it was not with fire or fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of something made to last. When the wind moved through the trees, it sounded like an old promise kept. And that was their life, not grand, not loud, but full. Full of warmth and work and the kind of love that didn't need tending because it had rooted so deep it held through every season. They never left the homestead. They never needed to. They had each other. And that was everything.